Taiwan, an island just over 100 miles off the coast of China, has become one of the most important geopolitical hotspots in the world. But why? How did this small island, with a population of just over 23 million, become the focal point of US-China tensions, a technological powerhouse, and a symbol of resistance against authoritarianism? This is the story of Taiwan, from its ancient roots to its uncertain future. To understand Taiwan today, we need to go back, way back, to its earliest days. Because before it became a battleground for superpowers, Taiwan was home to ancient civilizations, colonizers, and warriors fighting for control. Before Taiwan became a contested prize between global powers, it was home to the indigenous Austronesian peoples, some of the first great seafarers in history. Their languages and cultures share deep ties with Polynesians, Filipinos, and Malaysians. For thousands of years, they thrived on the island, hunting, fishing, and building intricate societies. The indigenous peoples of Taiwan lived in harmony with the land, guided by oral traditions and spiritual beliefs that connected them to nature. They performed intricate rituals to honor the sea and mountains, believing these forces shaped their destinies. Each tribe had its own customs, but they all shared a deep respect for the island's rich resources. The first major outsiders to claim Taiwan? The Portuguese. In 1544 they called it Ilha Formosa, the beautiful island. Though they never colonized it, the name stuck. The island remained largely untouched by European influence until the 1600s, when two rival powers, Spain and the Netherlands, sought to claim Taiwan for themselves. Then, in the early 1600s, the Dutch and Spanish arrived. The Dutch established Fort Zeelandia in the south, transforming Taiwan into a crucial hub for trade between China, Japan, and Europe. Meanwhile, the Spanish set up a base in the north, hoping to strengthen their influence in Asia. But the Spanish presence was short-lived, and by 1642, the Dutch had pushed them out. However, the Dutch rule itself would not last much longer. In 1662, a warlord named Zheng Qinggong, better known as Koxinga, led a force of Ming loyalists to Taiwan, determined to establish a stronghold against the rising Qing dynasty in China. After an intense siege, Koxinga and his forces expelled the Dutch, making Taiwan their base of operations. Koxinga ruled Taiwan as his own kingdom, seeking to restore the fallen Ming dynasty. He set up a structured government, promoted Confucian traditions, and attempted to strengthen ties with local inhabitants. But his ambitious plans were cut short when he died of illness in 1662, just months after seizing Taiwan. His son and successors struggled to maintain power, facing internal strife and external threats. By 1683, the Qing dynasty, now fully in control of China, launched a military campaign against Koxinga's weakened kingdom. After a decisive battle, the Qing officially annexed Taiwan, marking the beginning of 2 centuries of imperial rule. For over 200 years, Taiwan remained under Qing control, but it was always a frontier land, home to rebels, pirates, and indigenous uprisings. The Qing government saw Taiwan as a remote and unruly province, often neglecting its administration. Indigenous resistance against Han Chinese settlers and Qing authorities frequently erupted into violence, as traditional ways of life were threatened by waves of immigration and land encroachment. It wasn't until the late 19th century that Taiwan's fate took a dramatic turn, when China lost a war and was forced to give it away. In 1895, Taiwan's fate changed dramatically. After losing the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing dynasty was forced to cede Taiwan to Japan under the Treaty of Shimonoseki. What followed was 5 decades of colonial rule that would transform the island's economy, infrastructure, and society. The Japanese quickly sought to modernize Taiwan, turning it into their model colony. Railways and roads were built to connect cities, schools were established to educate the population, and industries such as sugar and tea production were expanded for export. But Japanese rule was not just about modernization, it was also about control. The colonial government suppressed Taiwanese identity, enforced Japanese language and customs, and crushed resistance movements. Indigenous tribes, such as the Seediq, fought back in violent uprisings, most notably in the Wuxia Rebellion of 1930. Despite these acts of defiance, Taiwan remained under Japan's grip. By the 1930s, as Japan expanded its empire across Asia, Taiwan became an essential part of its war machine. Taiwanese men were conscripted into the imperial army, and the island's resources were diverted to fuel Japan's war efforts. However, Japan's rule came to an abrupt end in 1945, when it surrendered at the end of World War II. Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China, but instead of liberation, the island faced yet another turning point, one that would shape its future for decades to come. After 50 years of Japanese rule, Taiwan was handed over to the Republic of China in 1945. Many Taiwanese initially welcomed the Kuomintang (KMT), believing they had been liberated. But this new rule would soon bring its own set of challenges. Instead of stability, Taiwan faced economic turmoil. Rampant corruption, resource exploitation, and mismanagement led to widespread dissatisfaction. Prices soared and essential goods became scarce. The Taiwanese people, who had adapted to Japanese administration, were suddenly under a new government that treated them as outsiders. Frustration boiled over in 1947, leading to the tragic February 28 incident. What began as a small confrontation escalated into mass protests against KMT rule. The government responded with brutal crackdowns, executing thousands of Taiwanese intellectuals, students, and civilians. This event left deep scars and marked the beginning of decades of authoritarian rule. Meanwhile, across the Taiwan Strait, a larger war was unfolding. The Chinese Civil War between the KMT and the Communist Party of China was reaching its climax. In 1949, Mao Zedong's communist forces took control of mainland China, forcing Chiang Kai-shek and his KMT government to retreat to Taiwan. With over 1 million soldiers and refugees arriving, Taiwan became the last stronghold of the Republic of China. Declaring Taipei as the temporary capital, Chiang imposed martial law, which would last for nearly 40 years. Political opposition was crushed, dissidents were arrested, and a period known as the White Terror began. Thousands were imprisoned or executed as the government sought to maintain control. Yet, despite repression, Taiwan would experience rapid industrialization, setting the stage for its transformation into a global economic powerhouse. But at what cost? The struggle for democracy was far from over. Taiwan in the 1960s was still under authoritarian rule, but something remarkable was happening. While political freedom remained tightly restricted, the economy was undergoing a transformation that would stun the world. With the help of U.S. aid, Taiwan's government implemented sweeping land reforms, breaking up large estates and giving land to farmers. This helped boost agricultural productivity and free up labor for new industries. The government pushed a policy of export-led growth. Taiwan began producing textiles, then electronics, and later high-tech components. By the 1970s and 80s, the island had become one of the 4 Asian tigers, a beacon of industrial success alongside South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. But this economic miracle came with growing pains. Income inequality, labor exploitation, and environmental damage became serious issues. Workers began organizing. Students started questioning the system. The seeds of political reform were beginning to sprout. Taiwan's economy was booming. But the people were no longer content with prosperity alone. They wanted freedom, dignity, and a voice. The next chapter in Taiwan's story would be written not just in GDP, but in protest signs and ballot boxes. As Taiwan's economy soared in the 1970s, its people began to ask a dangerous question. Why can't we choose our leaders? The Kuomintang's grip remained ironclad. Martial law silenced opposition. Speaking out against the government could land you in prison, or worse. But resistance was growing. Academics, lawyers, students, and everyday citizens began to organize in secret. They published underground newspapers, held illegal gatherings, and called for an end to martial law. One of the most pivotal movements came in 1979, the Kaohsiung incident. What began as a pro-democracy demonstration turned into a nationwide symbol of oppression. The arrest and trial of its leaders brought international attention and ignited the democratic movement. In the face of growing pressure, even the ruling elite began to shift. President Chiang Ching-kuo, son of Chiang Kai-shek, surprised many by initiating reforms. He lifted bans on opposition parties and began to relax press controls. In 1986, the Democratic Progressive Party was formed. A year later, martial law, enacted nearly 4 decades earlier, was finally lifted. For the first time, Taiwan's people could speak, organize, and hope without fear. A decade later, Taiwan held its first direct presidential election. The people chose their president not through fear or force but with their votes. Taiwan had become one of Asia's most vibrant democracies, against all odds. Taiwan's journey to democracy was long and painful, but it was real. Built not by rulers but by the ruled. And their voice would continue to shape the island's future. Even as Taiwan built a thriving democracy, one question has never gone away: what will China do? The People's Republic of China views Taiwan as a breakaway province. Taiwan sees itself as a sovereign, democratic nation. These opposing views have kept tensions simmering for decades. At multiple points in history, these tensions have nearly erupted into war. The Taiwan Strait crises were stark reminders of how fragile peace in the region truly is. Each time the United States stepped in, often through shows of military force, to keep conflict at bay. Though the U.S. officially recognizes Beijing, it maintains a unique relationship with Taiwan. Through the Taiwan Relations Act, the U.S. provides arms and promises to help Taiwan defend itself. But the exact terms of that help remain deliberately vague, a policy of strategic ambiguity. In recent years, China's rhetoric has grown sharper, and its military drills bolder. Cyber attacks, disinformation, and gray zone tactics are on the rise. Taiwan, in response, has stepped up its preparedness, both militarily and socially. To many in Taiwan, the threat is real, but so is their determination. This is a society that has lived under pressure for decades and still chosen freedom. In a globalized world, Taiwan has found support from unexpected places. While few nations officially recognize Taiwan as a country, many maintain unofficial ties. Delegations visit. Trade continues. Solidarity grows. These visits infuriate Beijing, but they inspire many in Taiwan. They serve as reminders that despite its diplomatic isolation, Taiwan is not alone. Yet the threat of invasion looms. Military analysts warn that China is preparing for the possibility of forceful unification. War games and exercises simulate blockades, missile barrages, and cyber attacks. The consequences of such a conflict would be catastrophic, not just for Taiwan but for the entire region. Taiwan isn't just a symbol, it's a strategic linchpin. Whoever controls Taiwan controls a key gateway to the Pacific. That's why this small island carries such heavy geopolitical weight. Life in Taiwan continues, full of ordinary joys and quiet resilience. The people know peace is not guaranteed, but they live with purpose and dignity, choosing democracy every day. Beyond its political tension and complex history, Taiwan plays a critical role in the global economy, especially in one industry that touches every part of our lives: semiconductors. Taiwan produces over 60% of the world's semiconductors, and over 90% of the most advanced ones. At the heart of this dominance is TSMC, the world's largest and most important chip maker. Its clients include tech giants like Apple, Nvidia, and AMD, as well as aerospace and defense contractors. From smartphones and laptops to fighter jets and satellites, modern life runs on microchips, and Taiwan is the bottleneck. Any disruption here would send shockwaves through the global economy. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed just how fragile this system is. A chip shortage caused by supply chain disruptions led to global delays in manufacturing, from cars to computers. World leaders took notice, and suddenly the fate of the global economy hinged on a few clean rooms in Hsinchu. Today, Taiwan is not only a tech hub, it's a strategic asset. Countries are scrambling to secure partnerships and diversify chip production, but no one has matched Taiwan's scale, efficiency, or expertise. Nations may want redundancy, but they still depend on Taiwan. But Taiwan isn't just resting on its silicon shield. The island is investing in AI, biotech, quantum computing, and sustainable energy, driven by a culture of innovation, strong education, and a startup-friendly ecosystem. Taiwan's future is being built by a new generation, one that grew up with democracy, digital literacy, and a global perspective. They aren't just making products. They're designing the next era of technology. In many ways, Taiwan's economic power mirrors its political journey, fast-moving, adaptive, and unyielding. Against immense pressure, it continues to grow, lead, and inspire. Maintaining this edge requires access to resources, talent, and trade routes. Taiwan's vulnerability to supply disruptions, cyber attacks, and regional instability remains a constant concern, but its resilience has proven formidable. In the 21st century, Taiwan is not just a flashpoint, it's a cornerstone of the global economy. And that makes its future everyone's business. Taiwan stands at a crossroads, economically vital, democratically vibrant, but under constant geopolitical pressure. The world watches, but the path ahead is anything but certain. There are several paths Taiwan could take, and each carries risk, opportunity, and global consequences. In one scenario, Taiwan maintains the delicate balance it's held for decades, functioning as a sovereign nation, building ties around the world, but avoiding a formal declaration of independence. China protests but avoids war. The U.S. continues support. The region stays tense but stable. Another possibility is far darker, miscalculation or rising nationalism in Beijing sparks a crisis. A blockade, a cyber attack, or even an invasion. Such a conflict could devastate Taiwan and drag the US and Asia into a broader war. The cost would be enormous, not only in lives but in economic collapse. The boldest scenario: Taiwan declares formal independence. Some countries recognize it. Others hesitate. China responds, perhaps with sanctions, perhaps with force. For Taiwan, the moment would be historic but also dangerous. No matter which path unfolds, Taiwan's story is far from over. Its people remain at the center, resilient, creative, and unwilling to be defined by anyone else's vision. This island may be small, but its role in the 21st century is anything but.